dominated the medieval landscape. And Britain has some of the finest in the world. Today, most are decaying relics, many of their secrets buried in time. Now, historian Ruth Goodman and archaeologists Tom Pinfold and Peter Ginn are turning the clock back to relearn the secrets of the medieval castle builders.
This is the ultimate in medieval technology.
The origin of our castles is distinctly French, introduced to Britain at the time of the Norman conquest of 1066.
3, 2, 1, tirez!
Here in the Burgundy region of France is Guédelon Castle, the world's biggest archaeological experiment. A 25-year project to build a castle from scratch, using the same tools, techniques, and materials available in the 13th century.
It's a lot of hard work at the coalface, because this is industry.
For the next 6 months, Ruth, Peter, and Tom will experience the daily rigors of medieval construction.
Drop down.
Yeah.
Yep.
And everyday life.
Looking really good, you know.
How workers dressed and ate.
You can really smell your food, Ruth.
And the art of combat. This is the story of how to build a medieval castle. It's March. Tom, Ruth, and Peter have traveled to Saint-Fargeau, 100 miles south of Paris, where Guédelon Castle is being built. They're now 17 years into a 25-year project, and over the next few months, its most defining features, the towers, will take shape.
It's just something else. Look at those things up there.
Oh my goodness.
Makes you dizzy.
The team are meeting members of Guédelon's workforce. Master Mason, Florian Ranucci, and site administrator, Sarah Preston.
This is amazing.
Well, thank you so much for coming so far to see our castle in the making. I'd like to introduce you first of all to Florian. Florian is our master mason, so he's going to be guiding you throughout your stay here.
You oversee this entire project. That is amazing. That really is.
Well, it's really simple. I just have to know very well the castle.
But you're almost like the puppet master. You have the people working in the quarry, the people working as masons, the carpenters. You've got to control everyone.
Well, I prefer the image of a musical conductor. We have to be in the same time walking. This is very important.
The rhythm
Find
of
a rhythm.
with them.
Yeah, the rhythm. So it's like music.
Well, if you're the conductor, and you've got the strings over there, and the percussion over there, and the timpani over there, I can play a triangle.
Building Guédelon is an enormous undertaking. It will require some 30,000 tons of stone that must be quarried, shaped, and lifted into position without modern machinery. There are also teams of woodcutters and carpenters constructing scaffolding, roofing, and doors. Blacksmiths making ironwork and tools, as well as tile makers and carters. In the 13th century, English workers crossed the Channel to hone their skills in France.
France is where architecture is happening. Castles, churches, we're looking at their built environment and thinking, wow, they're really good at that. And we're importing all those ideas into Britain.
As a military historian, you're very used to reading the theories behind how castles are made. But hopefully, as an experimental archaeologist, I can actually test some of those theories, put them into practice.
13th century life, there's a lot of questions surrounding it. There aren't that many records. So by the actual act of building this castle, it's almost like creating a window through which we can observe what 13th century life might have been like.
Building a medieval castle began with a wooden model.
So what is this model used for?
In medieval times, they don't have a paper plan.
Right.
So they used to have a wood model.
And I guess this is a way of the Lord saying, this is what I want my castle to look like.
Yes, and the Lord, he can change things with the model. It's very easy for him.
I suppose a medieval building site, like you have here, you can easily have over 100 masons. They all can look at this and know the angles they need to be doing and the wall that they're working on.
Guédelon's design is typical of the 13th century. Many British castles, such as Harlech, Conway and Carnarvon, have a similar layout. Castles were not only for defense, they were a show of strength, a lord putting his stamp on the landscape. Inside the walls there were grand houses, with great halls, kitchens, and even chapels. A thick wall surrounded by a dry moat protects an inner courtyard, which itself is protected by 6 towers.
Wow, this is the Great Tower. This is what Florian wants us to work on.
When completed, the Great Tower will be almost 30 meters high, providing a lookout for approaching enemies. And with walls 4 meters thick, it's the castle's ultimate stronghold.
So if we were the wall,
If I stand here, I'm inside.
you're inside. That's 4.
I mean, that's massive.
It just brings home how many tens of thousands of tons of stone will be in this castle when it's finished.
Back then, the only way of transporting stone over land was using horse-drawn carts. Minimizing the distance it had to be moved was paramount. So, like many castles of the time, Guédelon is actually built in a quarry.
In the quarry, we have the sandstone, the primary building fabric. We also have the sand and the water. That can be used to make the mortar. We have ochre, which again can be used to making pigments. We're on a clay lens here, and the clay can be used for firing tiles, roof tiles, floor tiles, and we're surrounded by forest, which is a source of timber. It's a source of fuel, so it can keep the blacksmiths going. Almost everything we need to build a castle is just a stone's throw away.
The boys are put to work extracting blocks of sandstone under the watchful eye of a stonemason who's worked here for 16 years, Clément Girard.
The first job, le premier travail pour vous, c'est de faire des petits trous dans la pierre.
Make the small stone.
It's very difficult.
You learn.
Minute de travail.
Clément's teaching the boys how to cut huge stones from the quarry into usable building blocks, using just a hammer, a chisel, and a wedge.
I don't think I've got the skills to do this. I'll give it a go.
Pressure's on. I'm glad it's you and not me.
So making this hole fit the wedge snugly. But obviously, Clément, with his years and years of experience, knows exactly how to orientate this. So the wedge goes into this one hole, you hit it, and that's going to cause a fracture in the already pre-existing sediment lines, and it will split in half.
Clément, is he good?
Oui, c'est bientôt fini. Bonne musique. Good music.
Good music.
And now, sledgehammer.
Wow, you can just see the fracture starting to appear. This is not about brute force, it's about listening, it's about looking, precision engineering.
Listen. Good. Perfect.
I see this as a good omen, Tomo.
The hardness of the sandstone varies considerably, depending on its iron content. The more iron, the harder the stone. So the medieval mason had a system of grading it.
You've got 3 categories of stone here: the pith, the paff, and the puff. You've got the pith, this sort of black, high iron content sandstone, and that's used for the major load-bearing parts of the castle. The path, this more reddish sandstone, and the soft one, the puff, sort of very yellowy, crumbly sandstone.
And it's almost like we're shopping for stone, really, isn't it? We're coming out here, we're looking at the colours, and we can actually get what we want for the particular task we're about to do.
These stones will form the main building blocks of the castle. Just as important as the stone were the workers. In the woods surrounding the castle, Ruth's setting up home.
Building a castle involves such a lot of people, and they've all got to live somewhere. So you get a sort of temporary community setting up at the edge of the building site as all these different people come and go with their various skills. And naturally, over time, that begins to become a bit more permanent, a village in the making. Indeed, many villages right across Europe, in Britain as well as in France, can actually trace their origin to being camps for workers on a building site.
We all know what that means.
This small hovel is typical of a worker's home on a medieval building site.
The workers' cottages somewhere like this were always going to be thrown up in a hurry and fairly sort of basic. But then so were those of most 13th century people. And this is our everything. This is all there is. Here is our kitchen, our living room, our sleeping quarters, just this one single space. Oh, look, marvellous. Off-cut limestone, this will do perfect.
The centerpiece of every medieval home was the fireplace. The fire was not just used for cooking, it also provided heat and light.
In grand houses, obviously, they sort of like cobbled this whole area. But we know from lots of archaeological digs that ordinary houses, it's just a patch on the ground. And also, I use a couple of bigger stones to balance pots on a bit.
The cottage needs somewhere to store the staple foods of wheat and barley.
Hi, Simon.
Oh, hello, Ruth. How you
Hello,
doing?
I'm good, I'm good. I was
Nice to see you.
thinking about a grain ark.
So Ruth is calling on English carpenter Simon Dunn to make a grain ark.
I'm guessing that making furniture in the 13th century was rather different from what a modern cabinet maker would do.
Oh, certainly. Certainly very different from what anybody would do now, or even in the last couple of 100 years. You're limited by the materials and the tools available.
In the 13th century, saws were expensive, so carpenters used them only when absolutely necessary. Instead, wood was split using wooden wedges.
Whoa, wow, look at that. Split all the way round down to there.
Yeah, and then turn it over and work a bit further down.
Gosh, this is faster than sawing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There we go. So that's in two.
Simon splits the wood again to produce planks.
So that's, you know, I mean, that piece particularly is a really good piece of plank.
Yeah, it's pretty flat. You can work with it.
And that's a couple of minutes. I mean, I hate to think how long that would take to have sawn.
The rough planks must now be smoothed off.
This is a side axe. It's just ground on one edge, so it's flat on the other. So you can just trim up the surface a bit. You can more or less use an axe like a plane.
Once all the planks are made, the ark is assembled without nails or glue.
Pegs, your basic thing for joining furniture together.
So instead of nails?
It's pegs instead of nails, yeah. So there are some things you do need a saw for. So we'll just cut the pegs off to size.
Right.
There's no glue or anything in here.
That's just wood.
So it's just the wood holding the wood together,
Wood
and
holding wood together.
it's not going anywhere. So, are you happy with that then?
I'm happy with
Is that
it.
going to do the job?
It'll do the job. Home isn't home without a grain arc.
Absolutely not.
Water was another vital resource to the building of a castle, and hundreds of gallons would have been used every day to make mortar alone. So castles were always built near a plentiful supply. Tom and Peter have been sent to repair the castle's well. To hoist the bucket, it needs a new rope and pulley.
How deep do you reckon that is? If we're going to make rope.
I reckon it's 10 metres down, give or take a metre.
You'll not find
But I suspect they sunk this to
anywhere...
a depth where they're never going to run out of water.
Exactly. It's crucial for defence. It's crucial for life inside the castle once the castle's operational. You need to have that constant supply, and obviously we need it now for our building.
You're on rope, I'm on pulley.
Peter's commissioning a pulley from wood turner Gary Baker.
Well, the first stage is to select a log.
Yeah.
And the pulley's going to be in this direction, OK?
So you couldn't just cut a life section through a log and just do that as a pulley?
That would never work.
Really?
The problem with the end grain, it shrinks at different levels and it's just going to split apart.
Right.
So we're going to follow the grain this way. We're just going to rough chop it.
What's the wood that you're using?
This is ash. Ash is a very dry wood, and therefore when it dries, it doesn't move. It's not going to warp and crack.
A mandrel is hammered into the centre of the roughly shaped wood, so it can be turned on a pole lathe. Pole lathes like this have been used both in England and France since before the 10th century.
It's just a pedal, pulling the string, round the mandrel,
Yeah,
onto...
and a flexible pole. And a pole, basically, all it does is lift the pedal back up.
The roughly shaped ash is turned to make a cylinder.
I have to say, watching you, that's really, really hypnotic. Well, it looks natural.
It is. It's like the gymnasium, medieval gymnasium. But you do get fit.
As well as a pulley, they'll need a rope for the well. Rope is essential on a medieval building site to lift loads and bind scaffolding. Tom's commissioning a rope for the well from the castle's rope maker, Yvan Herroir. First, he lays hemp yarns along the rope walk to form 4 strands, each with 14 yarns.
I can definitely see why this is called a rope walk. All we seem to do is walk up and down. For this 15-metre rope, he's actually walked half a mile, which is extraordinary.
The 4 strands are now complete. Next, they must be twisted together.
First stage of twisting will actually reduce the length of these strands by about 10%, so that's about 1.5 metres. So I'm estimating that's about there.
When the traveller hits this mark, Yvan knows the rope has been twisted the optimum number of times.
Very slowly, the traveller's moving in, but with each turn that Yvonne does, we get something that I see as being rope.
Gary's turning the cylinder into a pulley by cutting a groove in its rim.
it off. So smooth and so fast. Stop.
The yarns have been twisted to form strands. Then the strands are twisted in the opposite direction to form the finished rope.
To make the rope, you twist the strands against each other. That way, you create that tension and that torsion, and it stops them unraveling. Merci beaucoup.
Terminé.
C'est parfait.
I'll thread this through before you haul it up.
Now Ruth and Peter can fit the pulley and rope to the well in the castle's courtyard.
You know, traditionally, this is where people gossip, don't you? Standing round the well.
Well, still is. Standing around the water cooler. Drop it down.
Yeah.
Long way down.
Okay.
On a medieval construction site, the majority of the water is used to make mortar to fix the quarried sandstone in place.
Okay.
The production of the daily batch is supervised by Fabrice Mangot.
Right, I'm winning 25 baskets of this sand
25.
and 50 of this one.
Mortar makers had a vital role to play in the building of a castle, as the strength of the entire construction rested on their mixture. Formulas were closely guarded secrets and passed down from master to apprentice.
Due to the huge amounts of sand required to build this castle, they try and source as much as possible from the local area. And luckily, having the quarry right there means you've got a huge amount of sand on tap.
Lime is the key ingredient that adheres the stones to one another. It's made by heating limestone to 900 degrees and then mixing it with water to create slaked lime.
You good? That looks very nice, Peter. Right now, I think the experience is showing for the French guys. They're really putting me to shame. It's enjoyable work, though. I actually do feel like I'm now a bit more connected to the castle.
You like being clean, don't you?
Well, to be honest, Peter, some of us just get on and work. And like you seems to roll around and every bit of building material you can. Suits you, though.
It's just that natural magnetism.
You pretend all that grey hair is actually lime water.
Oh, dear. It's actually just stressful working with you.
Today's batch of mortar and sandstone are destined for the Great Tower. So far, it's reached a height of 18 meters, but when complete, it will be 30 meters high. The materials are hoisted to the top using a treadmill winch. The forerunner of the modern crane, it takes 2 people to power it and can lift over half a ton.
I mean, these things are an absolute, well, godsend, aren't they? They are the machine of the medieval building site, bringing up all the stone for the walls.
What do you think? We've got 500 kg of weight we're pulling up, and yet we manoeuvre it so easily, the two of us. My strength, your ballast.
And look, there it is. This is the ultimate in medieval technology.
To lower the cargo onto the tower, the boys simply walk in the other direction.
Okay, so walk slowly, slowly. Yeah.
So this is our stone, the sandstone from the quarry, and it will be graded into 3 lots, isn't it? The pith, the path, the puff.
That's pith, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
quite
that's
hard.
the hard.
That's path.
That's the medium.
And there'll be a puff in there somewhere.
That looks like puff.
Get some of these. The pith, the very, very hard sandstone, that is used for facing, for the structure, for the external walls, whereas the path and the puff, that's used to infill the walls, tie it all together.
Philippe Delage began his career as a builder over 40 years ago. For the last 10 years, he's worked at Guédelon, where he's perfected his skills as a stonemason.
You are going to lay the mortar, but don't crush. Yeah, just like this.
If you were bricklaying, you do it that way because it's got a flat surface, but the stone has to go in and the mortar has to go up into the stone.
Yeah.
So don't flatten it. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges is ensuring the walls are absolutely straight. The integrity of the entire tower depends on it. The solution is simplicity itself. A lead weight on the end of a string, known as a plumb line.
On the scaffolding here, you'll notice there's about a 2-inch gap, so you can get your plumb line down there and make sure the wall's absolutely straight, because if it's not, the tower starts going like that, it will start going like that.
Most of these medieval tools and techniques have been around for millennia and are still used on building sites today.
Like that? Yeah, like that.
Just doing the rubble infill to the wall. So we've got the facing stone, the pith, the hard stone, and that is laid horizontally, so the grain runs as it is in the ground. If you imagine a book, if you lay a book horizontally and you stand on it, it will support your weight, whereas if you lay a book vertically and you stand on it, it will collapse. However, the infill, that actually gets laid vertically, so the grain is going in the opposite direction. And that's because they're all stacked against each other and they push against each other around the tower, making this absolutely solid. All the tricks of the trade.
Where's that mortar, Peter?
Already in the wall, Tom. Already.
Good.
These, I'm hoping, are the secret ingredient to transform what is, frankly, a muddy hole into somewhere comfy to live.
Medieval sources tell us cottage floors were strewn with rushes, but just how they were laid is a bit of a mystery.
What I think might be the answer is to keep it in bundles and lay them in a sort of herringbone fashion across the whole floor. Look at that. And the temperature difference between putting your hand there and putting your hand there is quite astonishing. That is cold and wet and nasty. That is warm and dry and comfy.
Every few weeks, Ruth will lay down new bundles of rushes.
I think that when I get the fresh ones on top, what will happen is that the damp earth underneath will, as these crush down, will gradually compost, leaving you on top of new fresh reeds, well away from that, all dry and clean and warm. That's the theory. Nobody really knows quite how this works. We'll see.
Back at the castle, slowly and surely the great tower is taking shape. But before they can build up the walls any further, a doorway into its third-floor room must be installed.
We've got some limestone that's been shaped by the masons. It's going to go to the great tower for the doorway into that top room. We're just using this crane, as directed by Philippe.
Using this simple lever system, one man can lift 4 times his own weight.
There you go. Yeah, it's okay.
It's then raised up the tower, using the treadwheel crane.
I can see it coming up. Here it comes.
It's okay. You can come.
How do you find it, Peter?
I'm as dizzy as you like.
It's the heart rate up. Yeah, bit of a sweat going.
Would you, this was the thing that built castles. And this was the thing that made men feel quite seasick whilst on dry land, like myself.
Before the stones are fitted, a pintle is set into the stone, from which the door will be hung. It's held firmly in place using molten lead.
So what they've done is they've built this reservoir out of clay, and that way you can pour the lead in, it's not going to drain off, and you don't waste a valuable resource.
The masons have just one chance to get this right, as the lead sets almost instantly once it hits the cold stone. Getting it wrong might mean the whole stone having to be replaced.
Well, that looks brand new. That looks fantastic. It's amazing to think in a building of this size how little metal is actually used. But where it is used, it is essential.
Now the stones can be set in place, on a layer of mortar. It's essential that they're perfectly aligned. So the forerunner of the spirit level, the mason's level, is used.
Roman Britain, medieval France, or even a modern-day building site, these are tools and techniques that every builder would have been familiar with. These have been honed over centuries of use. It is timeless. It really is.
It looks good now. Yeah.
Our medieval square here says it's all good.
It's ready for the next stone.
Now the stone lintel that will top the doorway can be fitted.
This is very, very delicate work. This is an extremely heavy stone, possibly the heaviest stone we've moved so far. I mean, that is a serious bit of kit, and it struggles to lift this. It's so heavy. I think we're right on the weight limit.
Maneuvering this heavy stone with the simple crane is tricky. One slip and serious damage could be done to both the lintel and the surrounding stonework.
You got that, Tomo?
Si on est. Yeah. Yes, well done.
Oh, I felt quite vulnerable then, I've got to be honest.
Stone masonry, like so many medieval jobs, was heavy work. So a well-fed workforce was essential. To prepare food in the cottage, Ruth needs cooking vessels. Today, pots and pans are metal, but in the Middle Ages, they were often clay. Ruth is calling on the services of English potter Jim Newbolt.
When people think about cooking with pottery, I mean, I think people are scared of it, the idea of it now, but it used to be the way of cooking. I mean, it is the oldest form of cooking utensil of any sort.
That's it. Even your iron ones are called cooking pots. There's the clue.
First, Jim makes the basic cooking pot on the wheel. He then fits handles so it can be lifted on and off the fire.
And what I'm doing is extruding the clay.
Stretching it out.
So it means that as you pull the handle, it creates the grain. Like
So it's
wood.
going to be stronger than if it was just
squashed together.
Squished together.
Clay is heavy and difficult to transport, so potters sourced it from as near to home as possible.
Where do you get your clay from, then?
From as close as the side of the road as you possibly can. That's a pot hole. One way you could lose a wagon and team into it.
That's fabulous.
You pull over.
It's a hole where you've done clay for pots. It's a pothole.
You pull over to let another wagon pass and glance past.
Whoa,
Where's it going?
Next, Jim reshapes the base of the pot.
So what shape is best, then, for fire?
For cook pots on the fire, big round bottoms.
Right, you want no sharp corners.
No, it means that the heat moves around the outside of the pot. And then with a sharp-bladed knife, you start taking off the edge there. As long as the pot's made evenly, it'll work better
right,
on
so
the
if there's
fire.
big, thick lumps somewhere, then you're going to have problems around that.
Flaring it out.
The round bottom means it won't sit on a flat surface. So the medieval pot often had legs.
There's the cook pot.
The hovel is now fully equipped and ready to sustain the workers.
This is perhaps the most important thing in it. This is our larder, our fridge, our pantry, our food supply, a grain ark. Lovely, isn't it? There it is. This is the mainstay of our diet. This is our main food. It's the starch, the bulk, and it's also the source of any beer or ale we might drink. And the lid is not attached because it goes that way up and it becomes my dough trough when I need to make bread. It's really clever, isn't it? Simple. And then I've got all sorts of food supplies hanging about, and hanging is the operative word, because I don't want anything on the floor where mice and rats can get it, so hanging it either from the walls, like the vegetables in nets, or from the underside of the roof, keeps them safe away from all the crawling vermin, and the smoke, as it percolates its way out, keeps away flies. You can think of this space not just as a living space, but as a storage space.
After a day's work, the boys have returned to put Ruth's experimental rush floor to the test.
You've spent all day working on the castle, you're tired, just come back. I mean, this is insulating, it's cushioning.
It's quite
not as
comfy.
bad as you think,
It's not as bad as you think, is it? I mean, when they say they haven't got a bed and that's it, you just get a blanket and this is what you sleep on, it sounds a bit horrendous, but it's not. It's all right. It is a tiny space, though, to live completely like just one little space like this, isn't it?
Yeah,
as a whole family.
I'd much rather... Well, you say it's a tiny space to live your entire life. I mean, I'd rather be in a small space like this and get the heat in. You know, it's an easier space to heat.
And also, how much time are you going to spend in here, really? Like, these days, you think, like, you know, a sitting room with a TV and a big sofa, because you're going to relax in there. We're going to be working most of the time, and you've got all your jobs and tasks to do. Yeah. So that's sort of like... rest and relaxation isn't as important.
There's less time for it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Salut.
They don't clink, do they? That's about the only thing I've got against drinking bowls. They don't clink.
It's morning, and the team are getting ready for work. Knowing what ordinary medieval people wore is a challenge, but fortunately a few items of clothing have survived.
Most useful garments were survived because they were actively kept, because they were the clothes of saints. They have been preserved in churches right across Europe. So this yellow dress that I'm wearing, this is something that has been derived from two early to mid 13th century saints. Saint Elizabeth from Germany, and St. Clare from Assisi in Italy. So it's loose, but can you see, look, there is quite a lot of shaping to it. You can see all these seams. It's made very particularly to make the cloth hang nicely no matter what position your body's in. I have a belt. However, it's not to give you a waist, but it's all about creating an attractive drape of cloth. I tell you, it's the most comfy thing I've ever worn.
It is faintly ridiculous, I think, that medieval underwear is as big as this. I think, obviously, for Tomo, that's probably an appropriate size, but both myself and Ruth could fit into these. Oh, they feel a bit like a pair of 1950s football shorts, although, in the light, vaguely see-through. And then we've just got the hose, single-legged hose at this stage. But this is very similar to kind of, I suppose, stockings and suspenders. However, if they were sewn onto the pants, pretty soon you'd have a pair of trousers. You kind of see where the evolution of clothes comes from.
Ruth's headwear is inspired by the medieval queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine.
And as she got older, she decided that her chin was sagging a bit, and she wasn't looking quite as lovely as she did. So she invented a barbette, which goes under the chin and onto the top of the head, and pins there. And then with a barbette, you always wear a fillet And this is village, it's just another band sewn into a circle. And you wear that almost crown-like on top. It's a very 13th century look. So that's it. My French look.
Today, Tom and Peter have been summoned to the Masons' Lodge for the next stage of their apprenticeship, carving limestone. So far, they've been working with roughly hewn sandstone to build the castle walls. But for more intricate features like arches, windows and stairs, limestone was preferred, as its fine grain meant it was quicker and easier to carve.
We need for a chapel tower a lot of stone having 10 inches.
First, the boys used their splitting skills to create rough limestone blocks under the supervision of stonemason Abdelillah Abid.
Wedges in. Now you can try the big one. Perfect. Oh, good. Okay, very good.
The rough block is moved into the mason's lodge onto a platform known as a banker, ready for the skilled job of shaping it.
How many?
10.
Yes, very good. Remember.
Facing a stone was a basic skill that every stonemason would have had. First, the edges are cut using a pitch.
And a hammer.
Angle about there?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, you have to do it in one time.
One
time, yeah.
One swing through.
And you have to follow there now.
Like a follow through. Okay.
Very good.
A stonemason would have learnt under the watchful eye of the master mason.
I don't want to hear this. This is a bird. Tack, 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 tack. The stonemason, it's rhythmical.
Yeah.
Or quick. But it is always the same. You can do very rhythmical. You only think the rhythmical music, rhythmical, and a few minutes after, it's finished. Okay?
Stonemasons were paid per stone carved, so the quicker they worked, the more money they would earn. These limestone blocks are for the chapel tower. This year, the team are hoping to build the walls up by 6 meters to complete the chapel room itself. In the 13th century, religion was central to daily life, and nearly all castles had a chapel.
Here we are. Well, we are in this room.
Yeah.
And we have to draw the niche in the east part of the room, just in front of us.
Yeah. So this drawing you have is very much a kind of stylized view, but now as the stonemason, you must precisely mark it out.
Yes, exactly. We have now to transform imagination drawing in useful drawing.
The niche is where the altar will be. Before any building is done, the walls must be marked out with absolute precision.
This is continuing the curve of this wall.
The altar niche must be in the east of the tower. So Florian is marking out the east-west axis using an ingenious medieval tool.
I absolutely love this. It's a horn, we cut off the end. That's been tied to a piece of string, which is wound around an axle, and it is encased in ochre powder. I mean, the same ochre that we find in the quarry. When you pull the string up and snap it, it hits the ground, thus shedding the ochre and leaving an absolutely true straight line. And these, they've been around for millennia. Flip it over.
Using just a rope, dividers, and the ochre line, the chapel's walls are marked out. To reach this first-floor chapel, a limestone spiral staircase is being built. To design it, Florian and Tom have come to the tracing floor next to the stonemason's lodge. The tracing floor was the nerve center of the medieval building site, where the master mason drew full-scale plans.
Bonjour Clément. Bonjour. 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 Bonjour.
Using a compass, the circumference of the spiral staircase is drawn, actual size.
This is an apprentice job.
Always the apprentice, never the master. Florian and Clement are working out the central part of our staircase, and that will form the column that runs up, connecting all the stairs.
And now we're going to draw 12 steps.
For the medieval mason, geometry was the jewel in the crown of their art. Using just a compass, angles and shapes could be accurately drawn to within a degree, with perfect symmetry. Here, Florian divides the circle into 6 equal segments, which are then subdivided to create 12 steps.
Now we have the steps. We can try the steps in the drawing first.
I mean, this is a fantastic way to actually make sure, before you start cutting stone, wasting materials and time, that they work. You can see there, they're bigger than my foot length, so that's workable.
Now we need to finish one step.
Because all the steps are the same, Florian needs to make just one template.
This is a precision job now. You mess this up, you're going to mess up your stone in the castle. So the last thing to do is basically just cut the template.
3. You're done for you.
Thank you very much. We've got our template now, placed on top of our large piece of stone. We're marking it out with a bit of slate. Magic. There it is. Now it's ready.
Just cutting.
Just cutting. 5, 10 minutes.
2 or 3 days?
2 or 3 days. You can hear how good quality this stone is by the ringing sound when Clement hits it. And I think that's why, to be honest, I'm standing here and not actually being allowed to do anything. Ah, I like.
All right, line.
All right, sir. An apprenticeship for a stonemason would have been about 7 years. But to be honest, as Clement says, it's actually a lifetime. You're always learning. And Peter and I haven't been here long. And, you know, just so much to take in.
Carving stone takes its toll on the tools, and every day they must be sharpened by blacksmith Martin Claudel.
Is it true at Guédelon, if there's no blacksmith here for 2 days, work stops?
Yes, work stops because we have to fix a lot of stone masonry tools, and if we don't do that, they can't work.
First, the worn-down chisel is heated to 1,000 degrees to soften its tip. To reach this temperature, bellows blow air through the fire.
I love these bellows. One goes up, the other one goes down. So it's constant airflow, isn't it?
Martin draws the chisel to a point on the anvil, then sharpens it using a file. But the chisel tip will be blunt again in no time, unless it's hardened. Hardening is one of the great discoveries of the ancient world, achieved by heating the metal, then quickly quenching it in water. As it gets hot, the metal changes color, and this tells the blacksmith how hard it will be once quenched. Too soft and it won't cut, too hard and it will shatter. To carve stone, it must get yellow hot.
He watches for the colours appearing on the surface of the metal, blue, the red, and most importantly, the straw yellow at the very end.
Berries, berries.
Now, it's ready for the masons.
are few clues as to how ordinary people lived day to day in a medieval village. But Ruth's pieced together fragments of knowledge to work out how people did the most mundane of everyday tasks, like washing up.
Haven't got a scouring pad.
Step
I've
right
got
up and
sand. For the pad, well, this time of year there's plenty of fresh grass. I could use straw just as something to rub with. Now, if I've got to deal with grease, that's a different matter altogether. Sand will take the worst of it off, but, you know, I mean, no amount of scrubbing with just some warm water is going to shift the grease out of something. You need a little bit of chemical help. And for that, I turn to wood ash, just straight out the farm.
Berries, so
The wood
plump
ash
and
combines
juicy,
with water
you'll
to
wanna
make
eat
caustic
them by the
soda.
bushel.
When it comes into contact with fat on the dishes, it makes soap, leaving the dishes spotlessly clean.
Handful of ash, wipe it round with a bit of grass or straw, rinse it out with hot water, and you get a clean pan. Easy peasy, huh?
You spat it in my face.
Knowing what peasants ate in the 13th century is also a challenge. But we do know what ingredients they had to hand. Ruth has come to the castle's garden to see what there is to harvest.
It really do with some TLC, this patch of garden. But nonetheless, a fair few things are starting to sprout through, which is a relief. So I've got parsley coming through here, and a number of other things that you might think of as weeds, and indeed they are weeds, but are edible. There's a lot of land cress with this little white flower on. So that's quite bitter in flavour, but, you know, anything to give a bit of bite.
Plants that we now consider weeds would also have been used.
There's quite a lot of dandelions and nettles too, which will help bulk it out.
Wheat and barley were also essential ingredients. Flour was expensive, so workers ground their own, using a device that has been around for 10,000 years. The quern.
This is the sound of the past. A rotary quern like this is estimated to require about an hour to an hour and a half's work every day. This is the daily grind. You pop a handful of grain in the centre, barley in this case, and off you go. The posher you were, the more refined your food was. And ordinary people often made do with food that was really quite coarse. And you can see that in people's teeth when we're dug up archaeologically.
With the tools sharpened, Clement has put the finishing touches to the step. Now comes the delicate task of transporting it to the chapel.
Looks like your step's arriving. Well, I say your step.
The step is winched up the castle wall, using only manpower.
Ready. Slowly.
Break off.
Once on top of the wall, it's moved up the tower using an inclined plane. One slip and the step could fall, wasting 3 days' work.
What is it, Peter?
Rolling.
Be careful.
Yeah.
3, 1, 2.
These guys have been doing this for 15 years. So they know how to get things like this up here. But it's amazing what they can move without the use of what we call machines, but essentially the use of rollers, levers, inclined planes, pulleys, all made out of wood. Wood and stone working together, perfect harmony. Like me and Tomo. Do you want to nip down first, Ruth?
Okay.
Each step must be absolutely level, or else the staircase will veer to one side. A mason's level and plumb line are used to ensure it's perfectly positioned.
I suppose this staircase has still got quite a long way up to go, isn't it? And if this isn't absolutely perfect, the first little bit of skew, and that just gets magnified as you go up. But carrying anything up here, or, God forbid, fighting your way up here, it'd be really difficult, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Tomo's not stuck down there, is he?
Wedged.
Using the greens from the garden and the ground barley, Ruth is cooking a medieval pottage in the clay pot.
So, a little bit of water in there. I'm going to start with my leeks. This time of year, nettles are still quite tender. I wouldn't say that you add nettles for flavour particularly, but they are quite good bulk. They're one of the few things that grows in profusion at this time of year. That's softened down a bit now.
Grain is added to create a porridge-like dish.
Hello, Ruth.
Oh, you're back. How was it today?
It's going very, very well. It's amazing how the whole thing is it's all in two-dimensional layers.
They're
But
like-
then you
they're like
see,
cuts
yeah, a
through
third dimension appear, such as the doorway that we've been working on, put the lintel on there. Suddenly, wow.
Gives me a real feel, too, of just how much impact such places must have had on people. You know, if everybody's living in this sort of little tiny one-room, hearth in the centre, low building, and then there's that funking great thing out there, it's quite a shock to the system, really, isn't it? I mean, it makes a huge impact.
Well, this is a period when these great, like, military buildings, religious buildings are starting to rise up and really make an impact on the landscape.
The team are also getting used to the simple medieval food.
Don't be shy. Good
This is a triumph. This is an absolute triumph.
Feast your eyes
For
on a
barley and
fine selection.
vegetables, it's not bad.
You're a hungry man. You've been pounding all day at the stone, walking on the treadwheel. Anything is good to eat.
It's not exactly easy either, grinding the darn stuff. I bet it's just as hard work as pounding away all day in the quarry.
There's no easy jobs in the medieval age.
No, there aren't, are there?
Castles dominated the medieval landscape,
Never.
and Britain
Perhaps they
has some
simply
of the
got
finest in the world. Today, most are decaying relics, many of their secrets buried in time. Now, historian Ruth Goodman and archaeologists Tom Pinfold and Peter Ginn are turning the clock back to relearn the secrets of the medieval castle builders.
This is the ultimate in medieval technology.
The origin of our castles is distinctly French, introduced to Britain at the time of the Norman conquest of 1066.
3, 2, 1, tirez!
Here in the Burgundy region of France is Guédelon Castle, the world's biggest archaeological experiment. A 25-year project to build a castle from scratch, using the same tools, techniques, and materials available in the 13th century.
It's a lot of hard work at the coalface, because this is industry.
For the next 6 months, Ruth, Peter, and Tom will experience the daily rigors of medieval construction
Drop down.
and everyday life. How workers dressed and ate,
You can really smell your food, Ruth.
and the art of combat. This is the story of how to build a medieval castle. It's April, and since their arrival a month ago, the team have been learning ancient skills from the Guédelon masons.
Perfect. Again.
They've also set up a base for themselves in the shadow of the castle.
Building a castle involves such a lot of people, and they've all got to live somewhere.
The 13th century was part of the golden age of castle building, when ever-evolving tactics and fortifications were driven by the legacy of bloody crusades and vicious dynastic struggles. Medieval dynasties sought to expand their influence and protect their gains. They built imposing stone castles, not only to assert power, but more fundamentally, to withstand attack. Now the team learn about building the castle's defensive structures. They look at the ingenious features medieval castle builders devised
3, 2, 1, tirez!
and explore the craft behind the weapons they had to resist.
Don't be shy, good sirs and ladies.
Defence for me really is the raison d'etre of a castle. It's not just, the battles, the attacking, the defending. It's the
Vegetables,
structural
get your daily dose of
input
green.
that you have to think about. Your defensive, your curtain walls, your towers, things like that.
They are defensive structures, I suppose. I mean, they're much more than that, though, aren't they? I mean, they are about defending yourself psychologically. They're about telling everybody, don't even try it. And what about the weapons, too? I mean, what could they actually do against a castle? How effective were they?
Yeah. I guess how many men do you need to defend a castle?
And you'd need some ruddy, great big stores of food. And castles, people sometimes, knights and princesses, but it isn't. It's mostly about the likes of us, isn't it? It's about everybody else. And how do we survive?
Yeah.
A castle like this at Guédelon would have been built for a prosperous lord who wanted to display his wealth and power, and also needed his home to be strong enough to withstand potential attack. And this dictates much of its design, with 36 feet high curtain walls protecting the courtyard and residential spaces. Entry is via a twin-towered gatehouse, and at each corner above the crenellated walls, there will be 4 round towers, the highest of which will be the Great Tower, a superb vantage point nearly 100 feet high. In charge of the defensive structure of the castle is Master Mason, Florian Ranucci. He's traveled the world studying the ancient secrets behind medieval stonework. Guédelon's walls are over 12 feet thick in places. Today, the masons are placing a special long stone, called a boutis, into a section of castle wall, designed specifically to reinforce it against attack.
The boutis is to connect the front of the wall, front part, to the stone inside the wall. Right. The boutis, for instance, you have one here. This stone here is very long. It's here.
Yeah. I can
And
see that, yeah.
we have to have a wall really strong. Yeah. This wall have to resist an enemy. Yeah. And a better way to fight a castle is to throw stone to the wall. Yeah. If we don't put boutis, the front part of the wall will go down.
You can really see from this wall that you've got the external face, the internal face, and a bit in the middle, the infill.
Exactly. We are going to put one boutis. Can you help us?
Yeah, definitely.
Very good.
You're feeling strong, Peter.
I don't need to. That's the beauty of this.
Yes, try to be always in the middle of the stone.
Right.
It's a heavy stone to have a strong castle.
Boutis stones are not just placed at random. They're fixed into the wall at 3 feet intervals to give maximum strength.
The boutis goes in the middle of the joint.
So it's just linking in, but it's so clever because the pressure is now spread between 2 stones.
Yes, we have to think everything. It's like a game.
Yeah. Like medieval Tetris.
At Guédelon, they're using a medieval formula to make mortar, mixing water with quarry sand and lime putty. Unlike lime produced industrially, it will take many centuries to set completely.
We were afraid about it.
Because thousands of tons of stone being held together, it was a bit of a risk at the start then.
Exactly. And it's perhaps the first time in Guédelon that we use this old way of making mortar.
Through experimentation, they've discovered that clay impurities in the quarry sand give this mortar great strength.
So the experimental archaeology is actually giving you a really good building substance to build your castle.
Exactly.
Leather! Leather!
Tom's just putting the mortar down here, and he's making it rough, so when the stone goes down, that mortar will press into the cracks of the stone. If it was smooth, then you just have gaps, so if there's a bump in the stone and smooth mortar, it just wouldn't touch it. Whereas because he's making it all rough, it will squidge together and just keep that stone absolutely solidly fixed into place. It's looking good, Tom.
Well, perhaps it was simply a bad batch. These things do happen.
Every
Sometimes.
stone
Quality,
has
said.
to be in line, because
Impossible.
this is going to go up and up and up, potentially another 4 meters. These stones are slightly off, your build is slightly off, and eventually they'll collapse.
Now the stone will be
solid.
Solid.
The biggest threat to castles were sieges. These were far more common than pitched battles and could last for months, even years. If they couldn't get through the gates, invaders could try going over the walls with towers and ladders, or mining under them. But another, more sophisticated means of attack developed. From basic stone throwers to mangonels, couillards, and trebuchets, a range of deadly medieval war machines evolved. These came to dominate siege warfare for hundreds of years, until they were ultimately superseded by the cannon.
The largest ever trebuchet, it is thought, was that commissioned by Edward Longshanks, King of England, in the War of Scottish Independence. And he was trying to bring down Stirling Castle. It was a vast beast, called Warwolf as a nickname. Disassembled, it took 30 wagons to move it. 5 master carpenters worked on it along with 49 other workers. And it could hurl an object of 300 pounds weight with accuracy.
30 miles from Guédelon is Saint-Brisson Castle, which houses a collection of replica siege engines. The Romans introduced basic catapults to Britain. But by the 13th century, the development of counterweight technology saw the introduction of deadly, high-powered stone-hurling war machines. They were used in sieges to bombard defending troops and collapse castle walls. The crew wear protective helmets in case the machine malfunctions.
How big do you think that counterweight is?
How's it going, Tom?
It's good, mate. It's amazing how only 4 people can maneuver such a heavy counterweight.
Yeah, I mean, that's about 500 kilograms. The energy you're putting into that to raise it up is going to be stored as potential energy. Then when it's released, this, which is about 10 kilograms, this ball is going to be swung out and flung into the distance. They reckon it will go about 100 meters. Looking good. Right, he's just going to lock this off. There we go. Tension's on the pin. Now it's locked off, they can unwind this rope so that when it fires, or when it's loosed, the rope doesn't hold it back. So here we go, unwinding the rope. Whoa, watch those handles. Well, this is a well-trained crew, they know what they're doing. I mean, this is it's very different, isn't it, from doing it in peacetime as it would be in the heat of battle.
That's the thing about shouting, the noise.
Yeah.
These ropes can snap, the wood can snap.
Here we go. The ball, the projectile, into the sling, and it's ready to go. So we're standing back. Standing back. So we're just moving back.
Go to the seclusion zone.
I imagine if it was in the heat of battle, you'd just be there.
Yeah.
You'd feel quite lonely if you were the guy who's about to pull the rope.
Right, we're going to count down.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, tirez!
But you still, look how much energy is still in that.
And you have to get the mathematics absolutely right. The difference between the length of that arm and the length of the rope and the things. If you don't get that spot on, it can fly backwards instead of flying forwards.
But if you deconstruct this, it's essentially scaffolding. It's a mason-shaped
It
ball.
is.
It's the ropes that you made
And it's
on
exactly
site.
the same mathematics
Yeah.
that the masons are using. I mean, it's really, it's sort of simple, but it's also really quite sophisticated.
If you can build a castle, you can fight a castle.
Well, that's the arms race that's happening in our period, isn't it? The castles get more strong, more developed, more technical, and so the siege weapons become stronger, more powerful, more technical. It's each driving each other further and further onwards.
It's not fast, though, is it?
No.
Despite being slow, these mighty war machines were greatly feared in the Middle Ages. Some fortified towns surrendered at the very sight of them.
Right.
Shall we go and have a look?
Projectiles ranged from carved stone or mortar balls like these, to rotting animal carcasses intended to spread disease, and even the heads of defeated soldiers to really lower morale.
It's funny, isn't it, looking at the damage, you know, because it is just a small hole. But I suppose when you think again against a stone wall, it's going to keep going until it finds a weakness.
This is
one
the hammer,
after
isn't
another.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, a hammer doesn't crack
It's not a
something
great
with one blow.
explosion. It's
The persistent drip, drip, drip until you crack.
As well as being an archaeologist, Tom is a midshipman in the Royal Naval Reserve with a special interest in military history. He's been looking into what kind of armor an ordinary soldier might have worn in the 1200s. Not everyone could afford the expensive metal helmets and mail worn by wealthy lords and knights. A more basic form of protection commonly worn for combat was the gambeson, a padded linen tunic whose main protective element was sheep's wool. Tom's visiting Ruth in the hovel.
Well, perhaps it was simply
She wants to make him a gambeson, and the process starts with the sheep's wool.
Ruth, when you asked me here for a fitting for my protective clothing, I was thinking chainmail and armour. That's not the case, is it?
no. This is, well, it is, but it's not. This is cloth armour.
Cloth armour.
Yeah.
And that's good, is it?
It is good. Yeah, you're going to be glad of this, I reckon. So you may have lots and lots and lots of layers of linen, and then a big fat layer of wool, prepared wool, and then more and more layers, many, and then you've got to stitch the whole lot together really tight. Not so it's like big and fluffy like a duvet,
Right. Compact it down.
compacted right down into something truly dense.
I mean, it's almost, this is, modern body armour is the evolution from this. You've still a balance between protection and manoeuvrability and trying to cover as much of the body as possible.
And this is the ancestor of Kevlar, of the bulletproof vest.
it goes.
One of the defining visual features of medieval castles is their arrow loops. The ingenious design of these simple slits in the walls provided protection and gave castle archers a huge advantage.
Very good.
Guédelon mason Constantin Lemel has specially shaped a stone needed for building an arrow loop in a corner tower. Before they mortar the stone in place, they need to be sure it fits.
Right, so that's in position. I thought that was going to go the other way around, actually. I thought...
No, we have to alternate. We have to have a long face here and after a short one.
Yeah, okay.
And when you have a short one, you have a long here and a short under. It's to get something very stronger when you cross the stones.
Yeah, okay.
The funnel-shaped design of the arrow loop, tapering to a mere 3-inch gap, gave attackers outside only a tiny slit to aim at, while the defenders could look out without being seen. The arrow loops sloped down, so archers could see invaders, even at the foot of the tower.
If it was like this, for instance, we can't
only hit people over there.
Fight and shoot people. So
Unless you've got a stepladder.
So people can be in front of the tower, no problem for them.
Completely safe. And I guess also this is a weak point of the castle, isn't it? You're actually creating a crack in your castle wall, so you need to reinforce it.
People say that in the 13th century, the round tower was very useful to resist when stones are throwing on the tower. Because when the stones are coming, the round form used to be stronger.
Well, I guess you spread the pressure, don't you? If the stone hits there and it's curved, then all these other stones take the impact.
Exactly.
Well, Peter and I are probably firing arrows out. We just break our arrows on the inside, so...
This will be interesting to see if you fire an arrow or a bolt back in.
That's it, that's the trick, isn't it? If you're attacking, you want to be able to know, at least scare people, if not kill them, on the inside.
There'll be around 40 arrow loops in the finished castle. In order to test their effectiveness, Peter and Tom will need a suitable weapon. One of the most infamous at the time was the crossbow. First seen in 4th century BC China, by the 1200s, crossbows were increasingly used in European siege warfare.
Crossbows were probably introduced into Britain around the time of the Norman conquest. In some ways, they were less effective than the longbows. They took an awful lot longer to load, so the rate of fire was much, much slower. Out in the battlefield, in the heat of the moment, they were pretty useless. But in a siege, it was a completely different thing. Behind some nice, safe walls, you had time. And it was the sort of weapon that anybody could use with no training and no skill at all. Richard the Lionheart eventually met his end when a crossbow bolt fired by a boy in 1199 pierced him in the shoulder. The resulting infection did for him.
As a weapon that made knights more vulnerable to lowly foot soldiers, some despised it for breaking the conventions of chivalry. But the art of crossbow making became a whole industry by the 13th century. In Britain, it survives to this day, among a few specialist craftsmen, like bowyer Chris Jury.
This is what's going to be known as the crossbow prod, which is basically the bow on a crossbow.
What kind of wood is this?
This is yew wood. Now, yew wood is probably the best wood for making a bow. In any piece of yew, you get the sapwood and the heartwood. The sapwood is good in tension, which means it can stretch, And the heartwood is good in compression, which means it can crush. So the two grow naturally together in a single piece of wood to form a natural spring.
Chris uses a spoke shave to take off the bark.
I would imagine in the medieval period they would have done it in like a production process, so it would be done in fairly large batches. Apprentices would have started off maybe the sort of age of 13, 14. After 7 years, then you was a journeyman who was nearly at the point where he was a master of the craft. Then you'd be a master bow maker, and by that time you wouldn't even get your hands dirty with the making of the bows. You just let your minions get on and do it for you, basically.
So as I am your apprentice, is there any chance I can have a go with that?
Yeah, of course you can, yes.
You want to be gentle, but you've also got to put a bit of pressure on it.
It is, yeah, it's quite a delicate task because you don't want to be cutting into the sapwood at all. You just want to remove the bark.
Taking off lumps there.
Otherwise you may want
don't
to...
look, don't look. I'll start down.
The next stage is to taper the prod with an axe.
Yeah, I can tell you've used an axe before. You've definitely got a better technique than that with a spoke shave. You don't mind me saying so.
The more we do this, the more likely it is I'm going to make a mistake. You need all 10 toes, do you?
Yeah, you take one of your own legs.
Gone.
That's it, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, a bit of aggression is okay.
Yeah, that's it, gone.
A draw knife is used to further smooth and shape the crossbow prod.
That's it, it's still way too thick, so you can take off a lot of wood.
I suppose like with everything, it's just about getting your eye in, understanding the material you're working with and understanding the tools. And hopefully, it all comes together.
Yes, that's why certain tools like the axe and like the spoke shave and the draw knife are ideal because they follow the grain. So while the tools look a bit crude, they actually do the job rather well. But you can understand how the apprentices did 7 years because it's quite a specialist kind of task, really. So it's
yeah.
That's starting to take shape rather nicely. If you've done good work with your tapers, then it should bend relatively evenly.
Well, I think I've done exceptional work with my taper.
Well, it looks pretty good.
Carpenter Sam Rooney has come all the way from New Zealand to work at Guédelon. In his spare time, he makes traditional bows. Today, Sam and Ruth are experimenting with making a crossbow arrow, known as a bolt or quarrel, which was shorter, heavier, and more deadly than a regular arrow.
You imagine an arrow, whether it be for a crossbow or a longbow, and you imagine a little stick.
Yeah.
Why are you starting with a great big piece of wood?
Mainly for mass producing arrows. You can have several lengths of a tree and then just split it into small squares.
So I suppose, yes, I suppose if you think really mass production, that makes sense, doesn't it? If you've got to make 20,000 for a castle, the amount of time it would take you to find 20,000 sticks that were the right size and shape.
You have to send an army of people off to gather twigs.
Yeah, whereas 2 or 3 trees would do you your 20,000 arrows.
Yeah.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. You're just squaring this off at the moment, are you?
Yeah, I'm just squaring it off using a medieval bandsaw.
The thin piece of wood is then cut into individual strips, which will be shaped to make each bolt shaft.
And it'll be practically a circle, like this one here.
All right,
so that one's pretty much finished.
Yeah, that's about as round as you're going to need, isn't it?
So we're going to drill a small hole in the end of the bolt.
A metal bolt head is then attached.
You would not want that pushed through you, would you? Oh,
no.
What a foul-looking thing.
And the slit is cut so it can be fletched. It's recorded that in 1250, a chief English quarrel maker produced 25,000 quarrels a year and could be expected to make 100 in a single day.
It is
bind
a
it up.
huge amount of work, all of this, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Bows are still really woven into our modern life. And I think of the surnames. Bowyer, Fletcher, Stringer, Archer. And then all the number of phrases that come from one form of archery or another.
Come
Things
one,
like
come
to pick
all.
a quarrel or
Feast
a
your
bolt
eyes
from
on
the
our
blue
fine
or
selection.
he's got lots of strings to his bow. They're all archery terms.
They finish off their bolt by warming up a medieval glue made from an unusual source.
It's made from the bladder of a fish. You actually get the bladder and dry it out. Show a bit of glue in here.
So it's just a bit of glue on the leather,
Yeah,
shove it in the
just here.
slot.
Yeah.
That's it. There we go, one quarrel. Well, thanks very much. I shall give it a go.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks, Sal.
By the end of the 12th century, a new design of crossbow was introduced. The addition of a metal stirrup enabled the crossbowman to hold the bow with his foot and draw back the string, either with both hands or a belt hook. This was known as spanning the bow. Peter has come to make the stirrup with Martin Claudel, who's been a blacksmith at Guédelon for 4 years.
And they use a process called smith and striking. The smith is the blacksmith. He's the guy doing the thinking. He's got the little hammer. He's moving the metal around. He taps it. The striker has the big hammer. And that is me. I always hate doing the striking. I've got no rhythm, basically. But then he hits, I hit. He hits, I hit. And when he hits the anvil, I stop. OK, we good? And,
You're done.
all right.
Peter and Martin will hammer the iron flat and then bend it at 4 corners, making a stirrup shape.
I think we got away with that. It's certainly starting to take shape. We've got a kink in it. We've got a bend. And in these two ends, he's going to fire weld. So he's basically splitting the metal. So when they come together, they interlock. He'll heat all that up, and then he'll basically smack it as hard as he can and compact that back into a single piece of metal, essentially creating a fire weld, which is ultimately very, very strong, which will give it the strength it needs. Because if you think about putting your foot in it and pulling on that crossbow in order to cock it, you don't want your metal coming apart. He's going to ramp up the heat so it goes white hot. The reason for the darkness in here is so he can see the colours. Here we go. That's fantastic. Are you happy?
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Back at the hovel, Ruth has enlisted some help to stitch Tom's gambeson together.
Hello.
Oh, hi, chaps.
Oh dear. What are these? You're making rugs or something, are you?
You told me they were making you a suit of armour.
We are. Very, very, very slowly. That's the first layers of cloth all sewn together with the wool going on top.
Yeah.
And then I've started quilting this panel. I'm
So it's
putting
like
the other
a
layers on
front
top.
piece and a back piece?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you start sewing, you can see it starting to compress it down. Look, have a feel of the difference of that. Look how wobbly that is, soft and wobbly.
Yeah.
And then feel where it is when it's sewn.
Oh, wow.
I
Well,
think
it's
so.
nice to fight in the winter, because this looks
quite warm.
I think it's quite warm. And in fact, I have to be honest, don't fight anytime soon. You won't believe, this is a day's work. I mean, I've done nothing all day today except this.
Who's wearing gambesons?
They're being worn by men-at-arms, fairly ordinary soldiers, you know, and being worn by the rich soldiers in combination with chainmail. So they're being worn by quite a lot of people.
Yeah, I'd certainly be happier if I was on the walls wearing a gambeson to sort of stand there with my crossbow than I would be if I was
Yeah, I don't know.
In the 13th century, gambeson making was a skilled craft, done mainly by men.
You keep your right arm underneath, so you just keep poking and pointing. And I find if you stretch the cloth with your left hand...
Blimey.
Yeah, blimey, I'm glad you said that. Now you've missed. Look, you've come up right over there.
Don't want to go back down.
Yeah. You've got to come up in line.
Okay.
He's not a natural, is he?
At least I'm giving it a go, eh?
At least you're giving it a go.
No, missed
try
again.
again.
This is like pot luck. Right, this time.
Okay. That's better. That'll do. It's good enough. Right.
Yeah.
And you need to pull really tight, though don't break the thread.
Yeah.
Marvellous. And then straight back down again.
Straight back down.
That's it. And catch you with the other arm.
Not envy you. One eye.
It is slow, isn't it?
It is.
Chris is nearing the final stages of his work on the crossbow.
Okay, so here we have your bow, all nicely shaped and expertly tapered and nice and smooth. And now the next stage is to make sure it bends evenly.
The prod is ready to be put under tension, using a tiller stick. If the bow is not evenly shaped, the prod may snap.
So now we've basically examined the curve of the bow.
Right.
So the trick is you need to spot the weak bits before they develop into a problem and shave them away.
So even after all this time and all this work, there's still actually jeopardy about whether it'll actually be effective.
There's a massive amount of jeopardy involved in doing it. This is the real art of the bow. You need to train your eye to see the curve and to notice any flat spots in the curve.
I was going to say, because to be honest, it looks pretty good to me.
So we're happy with that. That'll make a good shooting bow.
The deep ditch and sloped walls at the base of the castle are designed to make them harder to approach. The only entrance across the ditch is a 10-foot-high bridge to the main gate. A structure which relies on a very humble element to hold it together: the nail. 677 were needed to make this bridge, all forged on site. Martin the blacksmith makes all the nails for the doors and fixtures in the castle. Inspired by a popular story from the Middle Ages, Ruth has come to the blacksmith's forge.
I'm going to have a go at making a nail. This, believe it or not, is a really female activity. The story goes that when they needed the nails to crucify Christ, the blacksmith that they asked refused to be involved, and his wife stepped up. "I'll make them," she said. It was a story that had a lot of popularity in the 13th century, and as a result, there are lots and lots of pictures of women working at a blacksmith's forge, nail making. Frequently rather ugly, demonized women. Great big hook noses, but dressed just like me. This one little piece of metal that we're working, how many nails will it make?
Maybe between 10 and 20, maybe?
It's not many, is it, for this much work? I mean, And I suppose that really explains why things like furniture are made entirely with no nails. They're all made of wood with wood joints. So you only use your nails where you really need them.
It's a precious thing to need.
It's a funny thing that when you talk about the past and you list all the crafts, people imagine that that means it's only men. If you look at the lists of guilds people in London and indeed in Paris, it's amazing how many crafts are in fact headed up by a female name. There were female blacksmiths.
Once the iron has turned red in the hearth, it softens and can be worked.
Almost ready.
Almost ready.
Ruth is going to try smith and striking with Malcolm.
I can scarcely lift this hammer, let alone do anything useful with it. We'll see. Scary moment. I've got a block of wood to stand on because I'm short. Oh, sorry. I'm not on strike, am I? Oh, terrible. As my hips are not quite central, that's why I'm making dents down the edges, and he's being very sorting out all my.
The metal is heated again and again. And gradually driven into a point before being squared up. The head is then shaped.
Just like that. I can really see why 13th century people were finding ways of using as few nails as possible. Such a lot of work.
The stirrup is in a fairly straight line.
To make the finished weapon, crossbow experts binds Peter's iron stirrup. Tom's used bow.
I mean, one of the interesting things for me about making this crossbow is you're relying on a lot of different skills.
Well,
Blacksmith making a stirrup.
Yeah,
bowyer
there was no such thing as a crossbow maker. One man made the tiller, the blacksmith made all of the ironwork, another man made the string. That's where you get the surname Stringer. When the guy at the end of the process got all the bits together, he didn't know how each individual part was made, because to him, and the trades were, before the guilds, were called mysteries, to him it was a mystery.
Right,
He
that's
just
simple.
He just wasn't aware of how it was done.
Group of individuals with very specific knowledge and skills.
Exactly.
Bringing together almost like a flat pack of a crossbow, and then one man
put it together.
What separates the crossbow from the longbow is really, in defence, you don't actually need a huge amount of strength or skill to use it. And use it effectively.
Training for longbows took from about the age of 7. Crossbowman, you can train him up in half a day. But he's still got the capability of killing you with half a day's training as a longbowman with 15 years training.
I mean, this is a weapon that was actually banned by the church, wasn't it?
A weapon unfit to be used on Christians, only to be used on heathens and Saracens. Nobody liked crossbows. Unfortunately, you get the oddballs like me that sort of quite like them. OK, now we come to the crunch. We're going to span the bow.
Moment of truth.
The moment of truth.
Stirrup works. Get your foot in there.
OK, is everybody Holy mother.
That looks pretty good, doesn't it? It looks solid. It's a proper piece of killing machinery, that.
Back at the castle, the team are almost ready for basic siege combat.
Look at you two relaxing. I've been away working. This is it. There's your stirrup, mate. I'll come in between you if that's all right.
That looks pretty good.
Are you surprised?
Yes.
Fair enough. I'll be honest, it wasn't me that did most of it. This is our medieval killing machine.
That's quite a long trigger there.
It's a long trigger.
Oh, wow.
And that's our ammunition, is it?
Okay.
Yeah, it looks quite deadly.
God, that looks horrible, doesn't it?
And you think, if you've dipped that in some animal dung or something like that, you've actually got a biological weapon there as well. You're going to infect someone, even if you don't kill them straight off. Yeah. You're going to do damage. It's not a nice weapon.
Is there any such thing?
Wow, very true, very true.
So, Ruth, how is Tomo's Gambeson coming off?
Well, it's not finished, I can tell you that.
That's it there, is it?
Yeah, where's the front panel? I got it sort of shaped and
It's looking pretty
mostly
good.
bound. It's a pretty rigid beast. Have I got the right shape?
Quite heavy.
Ooh. Oh.
Come on, get you.
Oh, blimey. So how much more work is there to
Well,
do
I'm
on
going to
this?
do the back panel. You're not getting sleeves. I've given up on sleeves. Initially, I was going to plan you the proper full gambeson with the sleeves, but I'm sorry.
I think it would be a bit like a straitjacket if it had sleeves, but...
I found an
Never beg.
ancient gambeson that's at the end of its life. If you want to try a complete one on. But
Put one on Peter.
Oh, no.
I told you it was a bit smelly and ancient, didn't I?
This is classic gin.
It's smelly.
Might actually be alive.
Smells like a
this.
tent, that.
It's like a straitjacket, doesn't
Arms
it?
out.
See, look how much softer this one is than the other one. This is much more flexible.
I quite like mine, to be honest. I like the cleanness of mine.
Cleanness.
Let's do me up.
It is like in a straitjacket.
You start at the top, do you? Shall I hold it across?
Yeah.
You could just imagine some chaps trying to get into all this lot in a hurry, can't you?
It's a real team effort, isn't it, actually?
They are. Go on, I'll do. What do you think?
Yes, this is...
Suits you.
It's pretty good.
Not just aesthetic. You feel strong?
Yeah.
You've got a few little weak points.
It's going to protect.
Those who could afford it would have covered their gambeson with a chainmail shirt, weighing over 25 pounds.
There's only one way of doing this.
Oh, no, this is like...
Right hand to the right piece.
Oh, my hair's stuck in it. Oh, I'm going to have a bald spot by the time I get out here.
Can you get in?
Oh, we've lost the sleeve on this side.
That's so glamorous.
Here we go.
Pull your sleeve up.
There we go.
Oh,
How's your movement now? I mean, see, it's a
It's
bit...
good. It's
bit more restrictive under the arms.
It's actually not that restrictive. It's just the weight, you know.
It's heavy.
It's heavy.
It's really heavy.
But it's not that heavy. I can still...
Do this stuff.
You see the chainmail on, it actually looks like it would give you better protection than I thought originally against something like
It
this.
is quite dense, isn't it?
That's fine. That's actually fine.
I'll take a run up. Close contact.
You're going to be pretty safe from a sword blow, aren't you?
Yeah.
Now we get to see him taking that off.
We're not going to help.